Dawn breaks over the Nile in much the same way as it always has, mist lifting as boats glide to and from islands around Aswan. But thousands of years ago, on the shores and on islands, stood temples where priests once hailed the sun's rebirth and performed sacred rituals. In this video, we're going to explore the ruins of two major temples that existed here. One, the largest freestanding temple in Lower Nubia, and the other, one of the last ancient Egyptian temples to remain active. And what do both of these temples have in common? They were rescued, block by block, from the rising waters of Lake Nasser, and they, along with many other retrieved artifacts from the lake, are now to be found on islands in the river, and I'm going to take you there. Breakfast here at the Move and Pick Hotel on Elephantine Island is unbeatable. The view of the Nile right outside makes every bite taste even better. If you recall, our earlier episode on the temples of Abu Simbel discussed how they were part of an amazing preservation effort to save ancient remains from destruction. The project was called the International Campaign to Save the Monuments of Nubia and was active between 1960 and 1980, headed by the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, or UNESCO for short. With Egypt's Aswan High Dam rising in the 1960s, UNESCO launched a coalition of 50 nations to rescue endangered Nubian monuments from flooding. Over 2 decades, engineers meticulously dismantled and relocated 22 monuments. This effort ensured that these ancient sanctuaries would survive beneath the desert sky for future generations. Among them were the structures on New Kalabsha Island, which is where we are headed. The site is located about 14 kilometers, 8 or 9 miles, south of Elephantine, but it was easier to drive the tour group down to Lake Nasser and then take a boat to the island. The island, by the way, did not exist prior to the creation of the dam. It was just high ground that seemed suitable to place the monuments that needed rescue. The temple, which was a sanctuary dedicated to the Nubian god Mandulis, sat originally on the west bank of the Nile at a village called Kalabsha, about 35 kilometers south of here, which is now underwater. Kalabsha had a temple before this one, and it had been built by Amenhotep II during the New Kingdom. But around 30 BCE, Augustus Caesar, emperor of Rome, rebuilt it as a much grander temple dedicated to the Nubian sun god. But even though the temple was open for business, it was never fully completed.
There she be.
Augustus had several temples constructed in Roman-controlled Nubia and Egypt, with inscriptions and scenes showing him clothed as an Egyptian pharaoh, burning incense and pouring wine or milk as an offering to the Egyptian and Nubian gods. Many of his depictions are inscribed with a cartouche, which would usually hold the name of the pharaoh. In Augustus' case, the cartouches simply read pharaoh, or autokrator, which is Greek for emperor, or sometimes Kaisaros, Caesar. These scenes on temple walls were probably carved to assure the Egyptian and Nubian people that Augustus would continue to honor their gods and deities, but more importantly, to reinforce his claim as ruler of their lands.
This island was once infested with crocodiles, but they say that they cleaned all the crocodiles out, so we're going to take their word for it, but I'm going to watch my step. You can see, oh look it, here's Horus, seated Horus with a falcon head, and up top you can see a representation of the king on the right, the king of Upper Egypt, and then the king with the double crown. I believe these are all representations of Augustus Caesar. He's facing different gods. He's worshiping. This is Caesar worshiping the different gods. So on the right, he's worshiping Horus. One of these is Mandulis, the Nubian god. I think it might be the next one. The temple here is pretty standard in the way it's laid out. You have this monumental gateway. We call that a pylon, leading into an open-air forecourt. Oh, look at this. So here's the court with columns all around. There were more columns at one time. Notice the different capital styles on the tops of the columns. This is Caesar Augustus right here. On either side of him you have Thoth and Ra-Horakhti, and then this appears to be Horus over here. I think there was a sun above Ra-Horakhti's head. So they're pouring holy water over him like an anointing. Coronation. His coronation. Okay. So basically accepting the Caesar's rulership over the land. So you come in the monumental gateway, you come into the courtyard. This has been open air. And then you come into the hypostyle hall. And there were 8 columns originally. There's only 6 now. I guess there's a bottom of one over there and the bottom of another. So there were 8. Look at all this was moved, by the way, right? All this was moved. It wasn't originally here. They had to move this entire temple, piece by piece, here to this island to save it. These columns obviously have been restored. There's not much of the original pieces left, is there? But they've got a lot of the walls. Look at all the preserved blocks still here. You can understand why they had to save this. I mean, you can't let this go underwater, right? Yeah. You can see various gods here. And this is Mandulis here. That's Isis. That's Isis right here. Okay? But you keep seeing this god here. I'm pretty sure this is Mandulis.
Mandulis is sometimes shown as a human-headed bird, which is very similar to the Egyptian representation of the Ba. In ancient Egypt, the Ba was the spirit that represented the personality of a person. Osiris and Isis were also worshipped here.
If you see right up here, that second panel from the top, there is in the middle someone making offerings, incense offerings to 2 deities, and in the cartouche it identifies him as Amenhotep II. So this is a king from the 18th dynasty, long before Augustus Caesar. But it was believed that this temple was built on top of an original one that had been founded by Amenhotep II. So he is being honored here in the reliefs.
In 250 CE, the Roman governor, Aurelius Bessarion, had a decree carved into the walls forbidding pigs in the temple. Once Christianity took hold, the temple was converted to a church, and the walls were adorned with Coptic inscriptions memorializing the conversion, crosses, and Christian paintings.
Up here on this wall, there's graffiti from all different time periods, but this here is a Greek inscription written in the 5th century by a Nubian king known as Silko. He was a Christian, and he talks about defeating the Blemies, who were idol worshippers, written in Greek. And then over here, we have an amazing inscription. This is in the Meroitic language. This is the language of Meroe down in Nubia. And this is the longest surviving Meroitic inscription that has come down to us.
Past the hypostyle hall are 3 chambers, one after the other, used for ceremonies and offerings. A staircase leads to the roof of the temple.
All along the bottom here, you can see these deities with symbols above their heads. These are the symbols of the various provinces of Egypt, right? And the god of each province, right? All along the bottom, okay? From the various regions, all the way around, to emphasize, of course, that all the gods of all of the land have come together here at this temple. They were still doing reliefs like this in Roman times. Now you can tell from the style that it is later. The later style has from the Ptolemaic period and later, a little bit more of a cartoony feel to it, but still amazing work. It would be interesting to also know all the furniture that was in here, but it's gone now. Yeah. And I wouldn't be surprised if the statues of gods were in here, but they would have been destroyed. Although there are no remains of them. Well, maybe there were. I don't know.
And there's no alcove.
What do you think of this, huh?
This is very, very, very cool.
Doorway on either side. Back chamber. Hallway. Ooh, it may have been used for storage. I'm not sure what they would have put in here. So just offerings galore, just all kinds of offerings being brought of all sorts, animals of various kinds, all along the bottom. And of course, details about these offerings and who is bringing them. But this is how we learn about the kinds of offerings that would have been given here, because perishables don't last, right? They wouldn't be here anymore. But this is how we know.
Another interesting feature in the temple is a Nilometer. I showed you one of these at the Temple of Khnum on Elephantine Island in episode 2 of this series. Nilometers, as you may know, were built to measure the level of the Nile. Here, a circular well was cut into the bedrock, about 88 meters deep, that connected with the waters of the Nile. On the walls you can see cubits carved from highest to lowest. And there are small alcoves cut along the stairway for the priests to place lamps for light. Access to the Nilometer was restricted, which gave the priests power. Priest would read the Nilometer and predict what the level of the Nile would be. A report of the prediction would be sent northward, and people would build channels and dikes to manage the water according to the prediction for that season. Tax assessors would also use the predictions to estimate the revenue they could expect from the upcoming harvests.
Look how much juice.
But New Kalabsha Island is more than Mendulis' temple. Scattered across its banks, you'll find other structures and fascinating artifacts saved from the waters.
When we were at Abu Simbel, if you remember, I showed you some graffiti on the legs of Ramses II, one of which referred to men that were on an expedition on behalf of Psamtik II. This is during the 26th dynasty. They were going on a military mission against the Nubians, led by Padasamatawi, one of the great generals of the time. Well, this granite stela, look at this beautiful Aswan granite stela with hieroglyphs on it, is actually the victory stela of Psamtik II himself about that very expedition. Now, this is an official inscription as compared to the other thing, which was a graffito. But this talks all about that military expedition, how it was a victory. This was, of course, not here originally. It was what is now under the lake. It wasn't at the Kalabsha temple, but it is now. They brought it here and placed it here to preserve it. It's a miscellaneous item. Here's one of the king's names in a cartouche, Neferibre. And this is his Horus name over here, identifying him. This temple here is the temple of Beit el-Wali. It is not a large temple, but it was built here by Ramses II. And again, it's one of his monuments of propaganda to show the Nubians who is in charge. It's not as spectacular as Abu Simbel, but there's some reliefs inside that have color still on them. Here we have the outer part, which is made of mud brick. Here's the pylon, that's the gateway. But also part of the temple was cut right into the mountain. Now, this is not the original location, remember. It was brought here, but they tried to put it back together in the same way that it had stood originally. So let's go inside. Look at this. Scenes of battle, right? Ramses holding his enemies by the hair, getting ready to strike them. This is a common pose for kings. You'll see him on his chariot here. See? He's riding his chariot into battle, right? You'll see him, again, holding another enemy by the head, okay? This is showing conquest. All along the walls here, right? You'll see him on his chariot over here, right? And the people's in submission. So this is, again, for propaganda purposes, Ramses is in charge. This temple is dedicated to Amun-Re primarily, but also you'll see other gods in here. Khnum, Anuket, the goddess of the Nile cataracts. It's a little faint here, but you can still see the color on here, which is very rare to still have the color. But here is Ramses himself offering incense before three deities, making offerings. And the three gods are those of Aswan, the holy triad, you might say. Behind him you have Anuket, the goddess of the Nile cataracts. Over here you've got Khnum, probably the most important god of this region. And then over here, Satet. We saw Satet in the temple the other day at Elephantine. And the three gods of the region are being given offerings. Look, here you have Ramses again. And look at his cartouches still have the color in them. See, even the writing was colored. He's offering incense again to, this is Amun. You can tell him from this crown. And you have it on both sides of the doorway here. So here he is offering to Amun over here. And then over here, again, making an offering to Amun. And in his hand, he has a symbol, this goddess that you see here with the Ankh on her knee. This is Ma'at, representing justice, the order of things. This symbol here represents all. And so Ramses is basically giving to Amun, like I have brought order to the world through my conquests and all that, and I am now offering this to you. So basically Ramses is saying, I didn't do this for myself, I did it for Amun. Here is Horus and Isis over here, and Ramses, somebody didn't like him over here and scratched him right out. But this is Ramses again. Here's got an incense burner. And then on the either sides of the doorway over here, you have him in battle again. Battle scenes. Holding an enemy Nubian by the hair. So here's the inner sanctum. Oh, there's some good reliefs in here. It's a bit dark. Again, Ramses in all these different forms, making offerings. Here to Amun. You can see all these offerings here. And then here to Horus. I was just thinking about all the food that was wasted. You know?
Or that the priest got to eat.
Well, a lot of it went like just completely rotted. I mean, right? They couldn't have. It's because it's offerings for the dead. So here you have maybe people who are starving, like, sorry, this is for the gods. You know?
Later, Christians converted the temple into a church, and some say a Christian hermit took it as a home, and that may have led to the name Beit el-Wali, which means House of the Holy Man.
So this is a miscellaneous monument that was discovered closer to Abu Simbel, but they brought it here. You know, this is where a lot of the projects were brought to be salvaged. And it's a stela, a giant limestone stela that was erected by none other than Seti the Great, Seti the First, the father of Ramses the Second. And it's basically, you know, what most stelas are about, an inscription commemorating his victories over foreign lands, all of his military conquests. And you can actually see him up at the top, although his head is not preserved anymore. He is in the typical smiting pose we've seen before. You grab your enemy by the hair and you're getting ready to strike them with a mace. And he's doing that here. And then down here, who's this? This is Amenemope, who was the viceroy of Nubia at the time of Seti, and he's in an adoration pose, adoring the king and his accomplishments. This here is the temple of Dedwen. Dedwen was a Nubian goddess, so this is a temple dedicated to a Nubian goddess. She's usually a serpent, but here she's portrayed as a lion, which is a little bit unusual. People wonder about that. This particular temple was built by Thutmose III from the 18th dynasty, so again from the New Kingdom, in dedication to a Nubian deity, plus the Egyptian god Mantu, the Theban god Mantu, the falcon god of war. There isn't much left to it, but there are some images up there that we can take a look at.
This temple was originally located on the island of Urunarti. Dedwen was the goddess of incense and protector of deceased Nubian rulers. But not much else is known of her.
Interesting, though, that they thought, well, we got to save this one, because there's not much of it. I think it's because it's dedicated to a Nubian deity, and it's interesting to find those. Also, in the area that is now under the lake, there were some very old petroglyphs. We're talking pre-dynastic, from between about 5,000 and 3,000 BCE. So this is before the first dynasty. And they wanted to save some of these rock art fragments. So they just took them out and brought them and set them up here. This is a temple of Garf Hussein. That's where it originally was located in what is now the lake. And it was thought good enough to have moved here. It was a temple to Ptah. Unfortunately, only the outer courtyard of the Ptah temple was brought here. They didn't bring the rest of it, but this was the most important part, the part that they thought was worth preserving, and so they have put it back together here at Kalabsha. And this was during the time of Ramses II that this temple was constructed. You can see images of Ramses. There were 2 here and then 2 over here as well. Actually, looks like there were more. They were probably, they were all lined up here. Ramses, 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 and then 4 on that side. This is very similar to Abu Simbel. When we walked into Abu Simbel and there were Ramses statues all the way down, this temple was constructed by an official named Setau. He was the viceroy of Nubia, appointed in the 38th year of Ramses. He also had built a temple over at Wadi Es-Sabua, another place that was saved from the lake. And over there are stelas that he erected about himself. There are 2, and one describes his early life. It said he was raised as a ward of the court in the palace, and he was trained in the king's court. He went to scribal school, became the chief scribe of the vizier, and then the other stela is about his promotion to become the viceroy of Nubia. And he and his wife have a tomb in the Valley of the Kings. But anyway, he was the one responsible for building this temple on behalf of Ramses.
Another structure saved from the rising waters of the Aswan Dam is the Kiosk of Qertassi. 2 Hathor columns flank the entrance, and 4 papyrus columns support a lintel or beam inside. The kiosk is unfinished, and the builder is unknown, but some believe it may have been erected by Emperor Trajan at the same time he built the Kiosk at Philae. And that is where we're going next. I told you earlier about the Aswan High Dam, which was completed in 1970, but before that, this dam was built. It's called the Aswan Low Dam, and it was finished in 1902. And although it was smaller, this area did experience flooding at that time. The island of Philae began to experience floods from the low dam in those days. During some years, the ground of the island was visible, and other years it was completely submerged, and only the tops of the temples could be seen. In 1932, the temple complex on the island was completely submerged by the Nile for most of that year, and the bright pigments and colors of the paintings were washed away. The structures on the island continued to suffer until the high dam was proposed in the 1960s. At that time, UNESCO coordinated the relocation of several structures that could be saved from the island of Philae. They were moved about 500 meters north of the original site to Ajilkia Island. Nowadays, they just call the new island Philae. To get there, you can drive to the port at Naga al-Khorur, and a boat will take you across. Being on the border between Egypt proper and Nubia, both Nubian and Egyptian gods were worshipped on the island, and it was considered a sacred destination for pilgrimages. A chapel dedicated to the Nubian sun god Mendulis brought many Nubians to the original island. Mendulis had a dual function as the solar and lunar god of Nubia, and was worshipped throughout Lower Nubia. As the religion grew, Mendulis temples were built in Egypt, and Mendulis evolved into the Kushite version of Horus. This temple was not only the largest temple at Philae, in ancient times it was also very famous. Why? Because people believed that the body of Osiris was buried at Philae. The Greek historian Diodorus Siculus wrote in his Bibliotheca Historica in the 1st century BCE that the bodies of Isis and Osiris, quote, rest not in Memphis, but on the border between Egypt and Ethiopia, on the island in the Nile, which lies near the city which is called Philae, unquote. He furthers his argument by saying, quote, it is for this reason that travelers are not allowed to set foot on this island, and all the inhabitants of the Thebaid, which is the oldest portion of Egypt, hold it to be the strongest oath when a man swears by Osiris who lies in Philae, unquote. And the Greek philosopher and historian Plutarch also wrote of the island in his detailed account of Isis and Osiris in the 2nd century CE, noting that Philae is one of the many locations where Osiris's body is said to have been buried. Quote, they also say that the sacred island by Philae at all other times is untrodden by man and quite unapproachable, and even birds do not alight on it, nor fishes approach it. Yet at one special time the priests cross over to it, and perform the sacrificial rites for the dead, and lay wreaths upon the tomb, which lies in the encompassing shade of a persea tree, which surpasses in height any olive, unquote.
While the oldest remains on the island go back to the time of Taharqa of the 25th dynasty. This is relatively late, 7th century BCE. This here is the oldest surviving monument. It's from the 30th dynasty, from the reign of Nechtnebeth I, known better as Nectanebo in his Hellenized form. But this is called the Kiosk of Nectanebo. And we actually see images of the king all throughout here. Here he is being anointed here. And there are images of him making offerings to the gods all through here. You can see these wonderful Hathor columns with the heads up there at the top. And this kiosk was dedicated, well, some scholars say to Isis, but there is another theory that this was actually dedicated to the god Thoth, a combination of him and a Nubian god named Pnubs. So that's possible too. But it's in great condition, and then it was refurbished somewhat during the reign of Ptolemy II in the Ptolemaic period.
A temple dedicated to Aron Snuphis has been preserved on the island. That's the Greek form of the name Iri-Hemes-Nefer. He was a Nubian god that we don't know much about. By Ptolemaic times, he had evolved into the Lord of the Abaton. Ancient Egyptians believed he protected the burial site of Osiris.
This little shrine is interesting. You can even see the Aswan gods up here, Anukat, Satat, Khnum. But this is the shrine of Imhotep. You probably recognize the name Imhotep. He was the vizier, the prime minister under King Djoser of the 3rd dynasty, the architect of the step pyramid. But here in later times, he had already become divinized. People worshipped Imhotep. Okay? He became equated with Thoth, and in Greco-Roman times with Hermes. You can even see a Greek inscription up at the top there. That's the times we're looking at right now. But this shrine was dedicated to him. This was built by Ptolemy V. And some think it was built to honor Imhotep for the birth of Ptolemy's son.
The Great Temple of Isis is the largest temple at Philae. Isis and Osiris were both worshipped here, as well as their son Horus.
This is the highlight of Philae, the biggest structure here, the Temple of Isis. You can see 2 granite lions on either side as guardians. And at the doorway here, at the pylon, the monumental gateway, we have Isis on either side. You see figures chiseled out here a bit. Some people tried to take some of the figures out, but they didn't finish, fortunately. But this temple was dedicated to Isis and Osiris, her husband. It was built, this monumental gateway was built by Ptolemy the 12th. He was the father of Cleopatra, the famous Cleopatra, Cleopatra the 7th. And you can see Osiris over there smiting his enemies on the left. Up there, you can see the King Ptolemy offering his crown to Nephthys and Horus. But let's go inside and take a look around. Here we are on the side. This is the birth house. In Greco-Roman temples, one of the features near the entrance to the temple is the birth house, which is dedicated to the offspring of the god of the temple. And in this case, Isis is the deity, and this is dedicated to her son, Horus. Let's go inside. Look at that, straight ahead. Here in the most sacred space, you can see right in the center here an image of Isis with her baby Horus. She's nursing him. Yeah? And the other gods here are doing adoration. And right above that, you can see Horus in his full falcon form with the crown of Upper and Lower Egypt, the double crown above, right in the center. At the original Island of Philae, when they built the Low Dam in 1902, the island flooded, and you can see water level here. See how it's cleaner on the bottom than on the top? This is how the water would come up to the top here. It was inundated. In the year 1932, I hear most of the temple was underwater, and only the top appeared above the water. This is really cool. It's a stela here. It's called the Dodekaskionos stela, and it was erected here. It's a decree of Ptolemy VI and how he donated land here to the priesthood of Isis for the temple. Why is it so big? Why is it here in the temple? Well, the priest used it to show that this land belonged to them. The king gave it to them. They are the owners, and they can do with it as they please. So it was very important to them that everybody know that.
As Christianity became the dominant religion, the Bishop Theodorus converted the temple into the Church of St. Stephanos, the patron saint of deacons and stonemasons.
Walking shot.
The dwarf. Yeah, he's a dwarf, by the way.
The beautiful Kiosk of Trajan shows carvings of the Roman emperor offering wine and burning incense to Isis and Horus. The kiosk has a little courtyard area that rests on the bank of the Nile, and beautiful lotus-topped columns that once supported a roof, though the roof is gone now.
You might be wondering what these scratch marks are for. You know, you see them all over the buildings here and in other places too. Now, one theory is that they used to sharpen swords on the walls, but another is that people who came here, they wanted to take a little bit of the temple with them. They'd scrape pieces off of it to bring home with them, to have a part of it, because they feel that they would be blessed by having it. See right over there with you have the wood and metal sticking out of the water. That over there is where the original island of Philae was. It's all sunk now, okay, underwater. But as you can see, the things that were moved here were not moved that far, but fortunately we're on a higher level here. So the island is, these temples are now above water. What's his name again? MS?
Although not placed here as it originally was, the remains of Hadrian's Gate, the last element added to this temple by Roman Emperor Hadrian, are worth checking out.
Intention of them preventing hieroglyphics being read.
We're looking here at the last known hieroglyphic inscription. Yeah, right here. Believe this? Now we're here at the Gate of Hadrian, which is a Roman gate, and this is older. This is from Hadrian's time. Okay, all this raised relief. But this wall was blank for a long time, and this was scratched in here later. Okay, this is the Nubian god Mandulis. You have a hieroglyphic inscription here and a Demotic inscription here. This is cursive hieroglyphs. And the scribe who wrote this, his name was Esmet Achom. He dates this. We have the date, August 24th, 394 CE. And he is saying that the purpose of him writing this is to keep the hieroglyphs alive. Unfortunately, it did not work, but we do not know of any later hieroglyphic inscription.
As we left, we asked our boat driver to take us over to where the original island sat.
Wasn't that something? Ancient people made pilgrimages there, and we still go there. You know?
The original island was only about 490 feet by 1,500 feet, smaller than the size of 2 Manhattan city blocks, but it had never been flooded by the Nile, in ancient times that is, even during the seasons when the flood levels were at their highest. This made the little island the ideal place to erect temples and shrines.
All right, over here we're looking at Bija Island. You can see some hieroglyphs on the rocks up here. You see that? And then we're going to pass a part of a gateway that they did not rescue, jutting up out of the water where that rowboat is.
One is Ramses. You can see.
Oh,
Ramses.
okay. So this one right here close to us is a Ramses inscription, and up above is an Old Kingdom inscription.
It's okay, it's okay.
Hey everybody, these here, sticking out of the water, are what's left of the water pumps that they used to keep the place dry while they were removing the temples.
Although we did not uncover any tomb of Osiris, it's nevertheless such an amazing feeling walking in the footsteps of ancient priests and pilgrims, and seeing how rulers used buildings of stone to claim divine power. Not to mention witnessing how modern engineers rescued these amazing sanctuaries block by block from underwater oblivion. But our adventure in Egypt is far from over. In our next episode, we'll head upriver to Kom Ombo, home of the double temple to Sobek and Horus, and then drive into Aswan to explore the Nubian Museum. Inside you'll see rescued statues, colossal reliefs, and everyday objects that tell the story of Nubia's people in pharaonic times. It's the perfect capstone to our time in Aswan. See you there.